Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming today and enjoying your lunch with us or at your desk at home. I am Carol Thaler with the Great Lakes Biomimicry, and we are a part of the Ohio Aerospace Institute. That's what brings us to this room today. I especially want to acknowledge a couple of important guests. We have 3 of our Great Lakes Biomimicry board members who are participating. David Nash, McMahon DeGullis is here. Kate Faust is somewhere in the world, and one of our 50 online participants today, as is Dr. Veno Chaya from Baldwin Wallace. So thanks to our board members for attending. Today, we're going to hear from Jenita McGowan, the Senior Global Manager of Sustainability and ESG Excellence for Eaton. And Eaton is a power management company with a vision to improve the quality of life and the environment. Jenita's focus, now you guys, she has a big job. I was reading what she's doing and it's a big job. Her focus is on setting sustainability strategy and goals, ESG reporting and transparency, advancing decarbonization and renewable energy, building employee engagement. So we're so glad she took some time out today to talk with us. She has 15 years of sustainability experience in corporate, nonprofit, and public sectors. She previously led the sustainability effort at the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. And she was also the chief of sustainability for the city of Cleveland. I think that's where we first met. At Great Lakes Biomimicry, we're committed to finding sustainable solutions. We do it by looking to nature's technology, looking in biology for finding ways to do the things we need to do. And at Eaton, they are also committed to seeking sustainable solutions. So now I want to welcome Jenita to the podium.
Thank you, Carol, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to come speak with you all today. Let's see. Everybody hear me okay? Awesome. All right, so for those of you who don't know about Eaton, we're about a $20 billion company in annual revenues, that is, with about 90,000 employees all around the world. We sell our products in almost 200 countries and we operate in about 75 countries. So we're a big global corporation. We're very diversified, and you can see there from the pie chart, you know, we've got an electrical sector and an industrial sector, portion of which is aerospace, split between military and commercial. And because we're here at the Ohio Aerospace Institute today, most of my presentation, when we get down to some details, we focus on that aerospace sector, but do know that we're doing this work for our vehicle OEM customers and other electric utility and other electrical related customers as well. We've been around for about 100 years too, and founded in Ohio, and still have our US headquarters here in Beechwood. So I'm going to start out setting some global context that I think is informing our sustainability work today. And then I'll talk about our sustainability strategy and our goals and the progress that we've been making, and then dig into one area, which is our sustainable solutions. So that's kind of what I'm going to take you through today. And I'm going to try to leave plenty of time for questions and discussions at the end, because I think that's really, you know, the most important part of this. It'll just be that rich discussion we have at the end. So for those of you who are paying attention, which is probably most of you, the IPCC released a report earlier this year, kind of setting an alarm that we were not on track to meet our 1.5 degree limit to climate change. The trajectory was 2 or above by the end of the century, and that we are likely to overshoot 1.5 degrees of climate change. And for those of you who are unaware, 1.5 degrees is really a threshold where human life and our ecosystems can really be really challenging, you know, to thrive on this planet. But then they said, you know, with urgent action and high ambition, we can bring that back down to 1.5 degrees with quick action. And so to me, this is I'm a stubborn optimist, so this is an even bigger charge for us to make sure that our ambitions are big enough and that we're acting with a lot of urgency around sustainability and climate action, and that we're accountable, that what we say we're going to do, we do, that we don't greenwash, and that we have sound scientific targets that make sense so that we can do what we need to do to bring this back down. So that's the global context around climate change. But we know that carbon isn't everything we need to be focused on when it comes to sustainability. So two other things that have kind of been in the news cycle of late is this idea that we have these 9 planetary boundaries, right? We have a system, we live on this system on planet Earth, and there are these 9 planetary boundaries that once we cross them, it's going to be really hard to correct. And 6 of the 9, they're saying we've crossed already. And these are things around biodiversity and ecosystems, I think acidification and some other things. And then, of course, the United Nations during New York Climate Week has released the idea that we're also behind on reaching our United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And these are the ideas of sustainability in its broadest sense of eradicating poverty and making sure that people everywhere on the planet have healthy places to live, are educated, have good quality of life, are able to participate in a sustainable economy. And so, while that might seem really daunting, I think it's informative and telling us how we need to be focused on our sustainability strategies and on our sustainability solutions, that they need to solve for climate change. They also need to solve for all sorts of environmental parameters, and they also need to help lift up people and communities. And I think I look at this as really just a continued call to action to make sure that we hold those foci in our minds and our hearts as we do this work. So other parts of global context then, because of those things, there's a whole host of regulations popping up all over the world around sustainability disclosures. They're designed to prevent greenwashing. They're designed to inform investors that their money is directed to a low carbon sustainable future. I'm not going to bore you by reading you all of these things, but they are changing the landscape of sustainability in terms of what customers are asking for, in terms of the granularity and the nature of the information they want about their products and services. And it's changing the amount of disclosures and transparency that's expected from companies like Eaton. And so that's translating into kind of a playbook for sustainability that customers are asking for us. There's more and more interest on partnership around life cycle analysis for products. They want this data to know that what they're buying for us is helping achieve that 1.5 degree future. And they're not going to take our word for it. It's not just talking points. They want the numbers behind it. They want to understand that where we're making those products, that we are or have a plan to procure renewable energy to make those products. So they're paying attention to the whole life cycle, including our own manufacturing operations. There's a lot of focus on electrification and switching fuel sources, asking us about sustainability and circularity offer. So product take back, remanufacturing, refurbishment, things of that nature. And then just general focus on eco-design and sustainable regulation is really just an unprecedented amount of data people want across the value chain. You know, who are your suppliers? What are their emissions like? Do they use renewables? So, you know, it's not just your own operations, it's upstream and then it's downstream in terms of your product and use and what happens at the end of its life. As you imagine, that might be somewhat challenging to kind of move in that direction. But to me, this is what I see where the world is growing across our end markets at different rates of maturity. But this is the thing, these are the items that are kind of popping up as things to be paying attention to and acting around. So with all that context being said, Eaton has a 4-part sustainability strategy. At the top, we're focused on creating sustainable solutions, and we have a business growth strategy focused on energy transition to renewable energy, digitalization, electrification, and then using sustainable R&D to advance those things. We're focused on reducing our operational footprint, so energy, water, waste, and carbon, and then engaging our employees in our communities. So we really want to have an engaged and diverse workforce that is active in its communities and volunteering and giving back. And that's very important to us. We see our employees as a really key contributor and essential stakeholder group to meet all of our other sustainability goals. We can't do it without them, right? And then doing business right and transparency. So we want to be a highly ethical company that tells the truth in our sustainability reporting and committed to talking about where we are in our progress. We're really focused on our health and safety in our manufacturing operations, and then just general governance of our sustainability program so that we have kind of hardwired accountability and management approach as we try to do this work. Let's see here. I don't know what's happening. I can't advance the slide, but let me try to do it this way. There you go. I'll just use the mouse. So in 2020, we stood up new sustainability targets. We call these our 2030 sustainability targets. And in those 4 strategic areas, we have long-term sustainability targets that we're shooting for. On carbon, these were science-based targets when we approved by the Science Based Target Initiative, meeting that our 50% reduction in scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030 is in line with that 1.5 degree trajectory. Scope 3 is a 2 degree and 15% reduction in scope 3. We've met and exceeded that goal already, and so we may need to refresh that soon. We've committed to $3 billion in sustainable R&D between 2018 and 2030, 100% zero waste manufacturing, and 10% of our sites zero water discharge, focus on areas of water stress where we manufacture. And then we also have targets around employee engagement, training, volunteer hours, and then targets around our safety metrics, human rights violations, and commitments to reporting transparently. So every year we publish a sustainability report. Well, okay, that's a little out of order, but that's okay. We also align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and try to understand how our actions help to advance those. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we have a dashboard we publish on how we're doing towards our 2030 targets, part of our larger sustainability report that we publish annually in June. And you can see the progress we've made to date. We've invested $900 million in sustainable R&D since 2020. We've reduced our scope 3, our value chain carbon emissions, 23%, and our scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gases, 27%. Since 2018, 75% of our manufacturing operations are zero waste to landfill. And as of the end of 22, we were at 8% of our manufacturing sites, zero water discharge. Now we're at 11%. So we've met and exceeded that goal ahead of schedule. And we'll have to relook at that again to see what our new water goal will be. I think I'm going to skip this slide because I've kind of already talked to this in terms of how we're doing and our focus on sustainable solutions, and kind of get right down to it. So we have an award-winning framework called the Positive Impact Framework that is focused on 6 elements of sustainability. So if you think back to those planetary boundaries and you think back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, while we're really focused on carbon and climate action, we're also focused on other things around eco-design that we think are also very important to our stakeholders and our communities. So our six-part framework looks at the environmental footprint of the product. So this is the materials, the recyclability, the embedded carbon, all of those sort of environmental attributes. It looks at toxicity. So are we using safer materials to manufacture the product? It looks at its efficiency and use. So we're at Heart of Power Management Company. Is our new product innovation more efficient than the previous version, right? This is something we pay attention to and measure. Safety and reliability. So we make a lot of solutions that are used in harsh and hazardous conditions, and we want to make sure that people can rely on our products to operate safely. When we look at total cost of ownership, we think it's important that maintenance costs and the lifetime of our products, that they also provide that to our customers. And then socioeconomic benefits. So that really looks into what our product is used for. Is it used for wastewater treatment? Is it used for renewable energy? Is it used for electrification of transportation? You know, what is the end use of that product, and is it advancing the world in a sustainable way? So we've hardwired this into our new product innovation. So any new product goes through several gates, and going through a positive impact framework is a requirement when we innovate a new product. We have a goal that 90% of our products meet at least 2 of these 6 dimensions. And we also have a goal to make the carbon footprint of new innovations 5% lower than its predecessor. So we use this to drive our targets around sustainable solutions. The chart to the right is active patent families that advance sustainable development goals. So over time, as we make good on that strategy towards digitalization, electrification, energy transition, we expect to see these grow. And you can see that most of our patents are around industry and innovation, followed by affordable clean energy, and then climate action. So we're really proud of this progress, and we expect to see these to go up in the future. So a little industry context for the aerospace sector. You know, IATA has committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So that would bring air transport in line with the Paris Agreement and this 1.5-degree climate future that we know we need to achieve, right? And basically, it means that there will be a coordinated approach across the aerospace industry to reduce emissions across the entire value chain to achieve this. What does that actually look like? So they have kind of identified these levers that all need to be acted upon to decarbonize the aerospace sector, with the biggest levers being sustainable aviation fuels. But I would say that Eaton is working on most of these things with some of our solutions and products, and partnering with our primes on innovation in these areas. So this is from the Fly Net Zero group, and they've kind of looked at the levers and the opportunities to decarbonize air travel. And they think that sustainable aviation fuel is the biggest lever. So switching from fossil-based jet fuels to SAF. Now, availability today is very low. There's a lot of government incentives to try to scale it up, and airline commitments that are amping up around this. But you know, today the opportunity to use it is quite low, but they hope to increase it over time. New propulsion technology is another one. Efficiency improvements, and then at the end you've got carbon capture, which, you know, that's scaling up too. I don't know how you carbon capture out of an airplane, but someone will figure it out that's smarter than me. And then at the very end, and I think, you know, it's the last resort, is how are we going to offset the emissions that are still going to come out of a plane? And, you know, if you pay attention to announcements that are coming out, many major airlines are announcing commitments or progress around sustainable aviation fuels. So Airbus can be operated now with 50% SAF blend, and they want to increase to 100% SAF by 2030, right? That's pretty ambitious. Boeing is capable of flying. They want to be capable of flying all aircraft at 100% SAF by the year 2030 as well. And then Emirates, I don't even know how to say that. Anybody know how to say that? Emirates, like United Arab Emirates. Sorry. I'm trying to make it too complicated here. did a test flight with 100% SAF. So the world's going in this direction. One airlines, I can't remember if it's Delta or Boeing, has a cool SAF dashboard up where they have like current SAF availability in the different regions and then expected ramp up to 2035 based on investments and commitments made by different policymakers. And I think it's something they've committed to updating over time. So it's a really interesting thing to pay attention to. And we're engaged with our OEMs and customers on SAF technical support and readiness. So out of our aerospace business, we are working to ensure that all of our products are 100% SAF compatible. I am not an engineer, but as I understand it, that's an incredibly complicated commitment because of the different additives from jet fuel to SAF can vary. I think there's 7 or 8 pathways to SAF. So the chemical nature of the fuels may be different depending on how the SAF is produced. So if you think about like seals and things that have to go on a fuel conveyance system, anything that comes into contact with the fuel, there's a design that has to happen so that it can be durable and function for the lifetime of the product. We have some commitments about sustainable materials. So basically, you may all be aware, Chrome-6 and PFAS, there's some no chemicals out there, right? That we're not supposed to be putting in materials anymore. And the airline industry is heavily regulated with a really long design cycle. So designing those kinds of things out of products and getting FAA or other approvals as we replace those with safer materials is something we're focused on. And then working alongside of our customers on all of those other levers that you saw in that previous slide. And we're already addressing some of these industry shifts. So here's some 3 recent innovations that came out of Eaton related to the aerospace sector. Electric vertical takeoff and landing technology. So this, as I understand it, this technology would be used for, urban short flight deliveries or things like that, where you can't take off like this. You kind of got to do this, right? And it's electrified. It has a whole host of benefits for urban air mobility. So we've got some of those solutions. And then again, as I said, we're working on enabling a sustainable aviation fuel. So as a drop-in fuel, so, you could be interchangeable with jet fuel as it blends up to 50%. And then some non-drop-in fuels. So the future of that 100% SAF commitment would require new products in planes or new planes, I don't know exactly to what extent. And so we're working on both of those pathways. And then high voltage propulsion inverter. All right, now I'm not an engineer, so don't ask me any more questions about this than I'm about to say, but this converts, DC to AC or AC to DC. And basically, this is the kind of technology that's used in electric vehicles on the road. This is a version for planes, and the point is we've lightweighted it so it can be used in an aerospace application. Do not quiz me on that further, please. So, at Eaton, we're focused on 2 pathways to decarbonize fuel. And I know I talked a lot about SAF, but we're also working on hydrogen. And we've got working groups or teams in our commercial and engineering functions working on both SAF readiness and then hydrogen innovation when it comes to aerospace travel. Okay. So this, I think I've already mentioned that we were working on the non-drop-in SAF, which would be 100% SAF. You saw those commitments from, I think it was Airbus and Boeing on that. And I just learned this, it has some benefits to do the 100% SAF versus the drop-in fuels because it has other improvements around particulates and emissions and air quality benefits. So again, thinking outside of just carbon, there are other benefits to the 100% SAF as well. And then understanding which of our products need to be innovated to do that. So pumps, valves, and conveyance systems. In the hydrogen approach, we're working on the UK Fly Zero program on a liquid H2 system for 3 sizes of aircraft. So I think that's interesting. You don't hear as much about hydrogen as you do the other stuff, but there's definitely work and investment happening around that as well. And then these look cool, efficient airplanes. So we are working with some primes on submittals for different types of airline bodies on these demonstrators with government programs. And these aircraft bodies are more efficient. They use less fuel than what's on the market today. So this is probably biomimetic in nature. Someone in here could probably speak to this more than I could. I just think they look really cool. And if they save energy, that's where we want to be. And so, as they're redesigning the bodies, I'm sure they have to redesign the systems too. And that's where Eaton would come in. So we publish a lot of information online. There's some links here. I know you probably, we can send out the deck if people want it. And then you can click around and learn more about Eaton and what we do and what we're focused on. But that concludes my presentation. I think we've got plenty of time for questions, comments, discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's start with questions in the room. We have to turn those mics on. And also Tom on the chat. Turning room. Okay, room mics are on. For those of you online, we're going to start with some questions in the room, and that will give you a moment to put your question in the chat if you're online, and my partner Tricia will share your question with the group. So, Jenita, we have a question there.
Oh, yes. Hi.
You might have mentioned it in your slide, but if you could repeat, you said Eaton is looking at 2 paths, SAF and then hydrogen. What do you think that balance is going to be between the two?
Okay.
Could you say that louder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We just want to make sure our online people hear the question.
Okay, sure. Looking at the combination of using SAF and hydrogen for your fuel sources going forward, what do you anticipate the mix of that to be?
That's a really good question for someone who knows more about that than me, but I'm going to go back to this slide because I think the new propulsion technology bar is the hydrogen and the electrification. So it's definitely much smaller than SAF. They're predicting it to be, but that would be the other types of propulsion there. So I think that's maybe what, 10%? I had to guess, and I can try to find more information about that for you. You're welcome.
I have a question on, you showed your business segments,
Yes.
aerospace, commercial electricity and so on. In those business units, do you have a counterpart you work with? This is kind of more of a operational question on how Eaton manages, you're sitting, directing this, and then do you have counterparts in each business unit that you work with that has sustainability accountability as well?
We have sustainability folks that work in product stewardship. So they're focused on like materials and regulatory compliance. And then I work with multiple functions within these businesses. Most of them do not have a person with sustainability in their title, but I work a lot with the plant quality folks, marketing, engineering. It really just depends, the nature of the engagement.
All right. Anyone else in the room? Herb.
Another question about hydrogen. Buried in the fuel conveyance and storage. Do you know any more about whether those valves and fittings, et cetera, are being designed for hydrogen to prevent the embrittlement?
I have no idea. I should have brought an engineer with me because they are so knowledgeable about this stuff and could speak to it. My assumption would be if we're working on hydrogen, we're working within our bailiwick, which would be fluid conveyance and valves and fittings and those kinds of things. So if we're working on hydrogen ready, my assumption would be that we're looking at materials that could function in that way.
I think it was Dan back there. Oh, Jude next.
You had one of your later slides, you were talking about the eVTOLs and the vertical takeoff and landing electric vehicles and sort of what we're heading towards. And work in Ohio on this, on advanced air mobility with swarms of smallish vehicles that are air taxis or small drones. And this is like growing the whole marketplace for the use of carbon generating aircraft. And I have this like concern about that. I don't know what is your feeling there?
I have a lot of feelings about about kind of trade-offs and externalities, right? So as we make this shift, right, towards SAF, towards electrification, there are trade-offs that we have to carefully consider. And, so I'm kind of indirectly not answering your question, but like, if you think about sustainable aviation fuel, if you're using biomass, what's the opportunity cost of that biomass for SAF and that closed loop life cycle and like sequestering the carbon at the end that gets that 85% carbon reduction only really happens if the system works as we think it will. And without any leakage, right? And I think it's the same thing for electrification. We think that if we electrify as we go renewable, then it'll have a lower carbon footprint, but we know that there are trade-offs around mining and metals and battery disposals, and we have to think through all of those details and understand what's truly of benefit and where to put our time and our innovation. So yeah, I think those are really important concerns, right? We envision this future of like congested urban skies. It's very like sci-fi, right? But I think there are ways, but if you could do it in a way where we're taking, diesel trucks off the road that are flowing through our neighborhoods right now, maybe it's a benefit, right? It has to be carefully designed.
Thank you.
We got one right.
Thank you, Jenita. Great talk. I appreciate your overview.
Thank
So
you.
Comment and a question.
Could you speak up a little bit for,
Yeah, I'll try.
try.
Comment and a question. It was, I think, refreshing to see targets that are aligned with kind of global goals, but also realistic. There were some you said you've already achieved, others you're still working on. So that's great. That was my comment. The question is, how does he deploy the 3 billion from 2018 to 2030? Is it, I've seen businesses operate where a corporate pot of money is then competed against projects within the businesses, or I've seen the businesses, the other opposite model where the businesses provide. So how
How do we deploy that? Yeah, I mean, so as you might imagine, there's multiple R&D budgets that go into different profit plans. We use this positive impact framework to determine what of our sustainable R&D spend we count as, what of our total R&D spend we count as sustainable. So if a ledger was used to make a product that meets the PIF criteria, then that sustainable investment was sustainable. And so it's almost a back calculation at the end of the year. How was our money deployed? But because we have a goal that 90% of our products are positive impact aligned, we're basically saying that, all of the dollars that we spend towards that will get there.
Okay.
So it's more of a series of feedback loops, right? So as we're innovating a new product, it gets to a gate check and it's not PIF aligned, it gets kicked back, right? And so then at the end of the day, when that product is launched, it should be PIF aligned, and therefore the dollars that went into it are sustainable.
play back to you what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm seeing is these different maturities of how to do this
Mhm.
for businesses, and you've kind of gone past the stage of we need to incent the organization to do this. You've embedded it. So I think that's great. That's
Yeah.
good to hear. Yeah.
We have a question online.
Yes,
Oh.
this is from Dr. Ochaya Aldo Wallace. He said, you mentioned biomimicry in passing. To what degree does Eaton consult nature in finding sustainable solutions to the daunting problems discussed?
Let's talk, Jenita.
There.
I know. Yeah, I mean, we use design for environment principles and educate our engineers on that, our product development folks. And, I'm sure that that is happening in
Yeah.
places. It's nothing that we roll up where I can give you a figure on that. And I'm sorry for a poor answer to your great question.
Dave,
Great presentation, Jenita. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Comment, question. Keep that slide up. I really like the positive impact framework focus of Eaton's work. But it generated a question which might be similarly difficult to answer like Vinod Chaya's. I'm working with a number of folks in the community to see if we can establish essentially a regenerative business practice or sustainability practice learning center in the region. So the question is Eaton starting to look at not just incrementally reducing the harm, even through these positive impacts towards regenerative or restorative products and technologies, or is that too far out there?
It has not been something we've talked about with that term. I think where we're going to have more and more focus is on circularity. And I don't know if circularity could be counted as regenerative, but and we have a lot of good examples of that today in pockets of product take back programs, refurbishment, recycling, salvage. Definitely in our own operations as we focus on zero waste, but more and more our customers are asking for that as well. And so in my mind, that will be our future focus that I think you could say is regenerative.
Yeah, circularity is a great place to start. Sure.
yeah, Herb, just a second. I have a question, Jenita. Can you talk more about your suppliers and what data they're going to have to supply you because you're getting pressure from your customers?
So I have a colleague who's amazing and she's our supply chain sustainability manager, but we talk a lot. So I'll try to answer that. Let's go for it. So we kind of have tiers of expectations of what we ask for from our suppliers. So all of our suppliers, we ask that they adhere to and affirm our supplier code of conduct, which has basic tenets around environmental conduct and human rights and things of that nature, business ethics, et cetera. Then we have kind of based on either our spend with them or how carbon intensive those suppliers are. And their level of maturity on their own sustainability programs, we may engage with them on education and training or even technical assistance. So we have a lot of small to medium-sized suppliers as well, very distributed supplier network. So we do webinars and we expect them to come and learn about how to calculate their carbon footprint, how to understand how, what good looks like in their sector. And if they're really stuck, we have a small carve out for technical assistance where we can give them some consulting hours to help them. Then we have a smaller subset of suppliers that are truly high spend or very carbon intense that we expect to report to us their carbon emissions on an annual basis and allocate those emissions to our company. So what portion of ours, what's the carbon footprint of our spend to those customers? And with the expectation that they will make their own targets and then work towards achieving their own carbon targets.
And a follow-up, do you know if the company has said to a supplier, you're not moving ahead on your carbon reduction, you're not reporting it to us, we're going to have to go to somewhere else?
I don't think we've done that yet.
Okay.
I don't think that's how we typically would engage with our suppliers.
Okay.
They're our partners.
Okay.
We're going to work together to make progress. Yeah. And, and I'm not aware of any customers who've done that to us as their supplier yet either. But there's definitely more and more communication and pressure on the topic.
Very good.
Yeah.
Herb, you still have a question?
Your question and your follow-up question were two that I was going to take. But I'll go a little bit further. So you said that you wouldn't switch suppliers, but maybe your customers wouldn't.
And my supply chain sustainability manager might give you a different answer than that. So that's, based on my knowledge.
What the issue sometimes is when people say that the smaller company isn't publicly traded, so they don't really put the effort. They don't have a motivation to track and improve on their carbon. But the more that their competitor does, at some point, other things being equal, would carbon have an influence on the?
I mean, I think possibly, yeah, I think it could. I think it could. If all things were equal and you had one that was focused on that and reducing their carbon footprint and helping us meet our goals and helping us help our customers meet their goals, yeah, I could see the future that would be the case. And I think the publicly traded company thing is an interesting statement because I think that is true to some extent, but more and more your customers are asking for it, even if you don't need to do it for your investors, right? So
Do you know of any situation where suppliers help each other with the carbon improvement? You know, that they share best practice,
oh
you
yeah.
know, in a sub-industry.
I was earlier this week, I was at the what was it called? Suppliers Partnership for the Environment. So it was an auto OEM supply chain collaboration group. The suppliers to US auto manufacturers got to get together quarterly in that organization and do just as you've asked.
All right, Tricia, anybody, is there a chat? All right. We've got 12:41. All right. Anybody but Herb. Herb's the guy in the front row of class. Anyone else before we go back to Herb? All right, the floor is yours.
At the other end of the spectrum, in one of your slides, you mentioned the community engagement. What are some examples of where Eaton has done things outside the fence? I mean, most of what you talked about is kind of
Yeah.
in your production lines or in your internal business practices.
Sure. So it's interesting because our community engagement and our charitable giving right now is very locally focused. So local teams decide how to invest in their communities. But we've got some really great examples, a lot of local reforestation efforts, engaging with youth and children around Earth Day and educating them about sustainability. We've had some groups, our foundation in India has done a lot of like watershed improvement and stormwater mitigation in their local community, like funded and supported that. A lot of mangrove reforestation in Asia. So, you know, it's kind of across the gamut. I think that's something that we could get more mature about, is being more targeted and rolling up the impacts of the sort of distributed community work, but it's happening all over the place.
All right, Dave.
Sorry, I'm trying to fill time. Corporate culture is very important.
Yeah.
Since you've been at Eaton, how have you seen acceptance of this work in the corporate culture at Eaton? How has it evolved? Does it go up and down? How do you picture the culture at Eaton and how that gets embedded?
Yeah, I think it gets embedded formally and informally in any organization, right? So there's conversations that those of us who formally work in sustainability have every day with people at all levels to kind of problem solve together, to talk about these targets and goals and what we need to do to work together to make them. And I think those are invaluable kind of interactions where people have trusted partners. They can come to someone, we can discuss this as a team, and it's not, you know, this thing that we're pushing down on people, right? It's just like, hey, we all work here, let's work together. And I think that approach is helpful and genuine. At the same time, you know, we've worked to more formalize the governance and accountability of all this stuff as well. So in 2020, we created a Sustainability Executive Council, which is our chairman and CEO, our COOs, a lot of the C-suite, who 4 times a year formally hears progress towards these targets. We've taken that scorecard I showed and we're cascading it down to the different businesses and the sub-businesses. So they're responsible for their portion of the metrics. And we've defined what good looks like down through the organization. And they're going to be just this year starting to report that out in their ops reviews. So, you know, we have that formalized structure as well. And I think both are really important on the culture. So.
Now your hand back there.
Okay,
You'll be next.
on page 8, you showed some of your targets and really again, it really stood out. You had a couple that you were finding yourself ahead on. What are you finding to be the more challenging areas that you're working on?
So it's interesting, I think decoupling scope 3 carbon emissions from growth is really challenging for us. I mean, we've met that 15% target. We've gone past it. Retaining that will be, I think, a challenge as we grow, even as we work to decarbonize new offerings. And I think, just to be really candid, because we're a power management company, a big driver of our scope 3 emissions are our products in use. It's more than 90% of our scope 3 footprint. And the primary levers on reducing that are the electrical grid where our products are used and the type of fuels our customers choose to propel their transportation machines, right? And so a lot of that is out of our direct control. It has to do with greening of the grid and switching to more sustainable fuel sources and all the infrastructure that goes into that. And so some of our conversations are around, our role is making the solutions that help this global transition. And if that transition happens, our scope 3 goes away.
Right.
So it's kind of like to me, it's growing pains, right? What's our role in accelerating that transition to solve our own problem internally in terms of our scope 3? And scope 3 is a topic that really gets people all wrapped up because it is outside of your direct control. And I think if we take it and look at it with the spirit of where we can influence and we make targets that we intend to achieve, even if we don't know exactly how we're going to get there, and we're transparent about that, I still think it's an important focus because scope 3 emissions by their very nature require partnership and collaboration. And I think that's just essential for anything with sustainability.
Or we're gonna wait. We're gonna somebody online.
This is from Ben again.
Oh, no.
Great presentation. Thanks for taking the time. I understand the collaboration with your customers and suppliers. Is there anything you glean from your competitors trying to achieve similar goals, such as Parker Hannifin, for example?
I mean, we do benchmarking all the time on our peers and competitors and their goals and their targets, how they're achieving it. The nice thing about this increased sustainability transparency is I can read everybody else's reports, right? Parker Hannifin specifically is not something I can speak to in terms of what they're doing, but if there's anything he would like to share, I'm all ears. So,
All right, Herb.
Thank you for letting me ask so many questions.
and then we had one behind you.
Yeah, we'll do that next.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Going back to the SAF and hydrogen, since those technologies are still like very early stage and 2050 is fast approaching.
Yes.
How are you meeting these goals currently then? How are you like on track and given that it's going to take a long time for that to be developed to the point of readiness, what's the plan in the meantime?
So the on the scope 3 goals or any goals, any scope. Yeah, I mean, I think so our operational footprint goals, don't require SAF to meet, right? That's our own, energy consumption. We're focused there on procuring renewables, both on site and then off-site utility scale, new renewables to the grid, not just our strategy is not just to go out and buy a bunch of RECs from 20-year-old renewable projects, right? I mean, we do a little bit of that, but not a lot. And then electrification, so that we can shift more of our energy use away from fuels to electricity that then can be sourced renewably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so you were talking about the supplements, so I'm assuming that would fall under like the new tech category. And then you also talked about carbon capture and offsets. Is that kind of where the focus is now while we're waiting for that technology to advance?
In our own operations, we don't do any carbon offsets at this point. So the 27% reduction that we have achieved so far has been through energy efficiency and renewable energy procurement. And I don't foresee us doing carbon offsets anytime in the near future to meet our goals because we think there's more work to be done on efficiency and renewables, which is where our focus is right now. The offsets, if you look at like the net zero science-based targets, they only let you offset 10% of your emissions maximum. And we have to get as much as we can done in ways that make sense for our business first. So offsets are a cost. They're a cost you pay every year, presumably to a credible project that's semi-permanent and doesn't have leakage, right? That it's doing what it says it's doing. But really, you're still emitting that much carbon in the air every year. And if everybody offsets, like it's mass balance, it doesn't add up. And so it's not been our focus to date on the carbon offsets. But we're working really hard on efficiency. We just finished 40 energy audits this year and have a pipeline of projects that have come out of those on efficiency. We think there's more to do there too.
All right, Herb, you got the last question.
Oh, make it no pressure.
We're getting close.
So at the intersection of my question about community and alignment in industries like aerospace or electric vehicles, we're communicating with companies that are interested in locating in our community who use waste to energy, waste to fuel, such as SAF, or who valorize biomass to create biogenic hydrogen or carbon negative silicon, carbon negative steel from pyrolysis. Is there any interest, I guess maybe at the charitable level, in encouraging the ecosystem of those kind of companies in the communities where Eaton has manufacturing facilities or its headquarters?
I don't know. So, we have a charter for our charitable giving. It stipulates certain things about how we give and what we give, and it's not something that I do directly. So I'm not sure. I think, whether it would be charitable or investment, I'm not sure if Eaton would do that. That's not something that I handle directly.
Well, maybe I should ask it a different way. When we had an energy storage, a regional energy storage group, Eaton, in Northeast Ohio, Eaton was active in that. And the goal of that was to create more of an industrial sector around, a cluster around the whole supply chain related to energy storage at the time. But that was, before this new era in electrification really took hold. And whether there's maybe it's on the strategic side that having a more of a community of suppliers versus global, local community versus a global community has benefit.
I mean, I think it very well could. We can continue the conversation and with other folks in my work. I just can't answer that off the top of
She
my
has a
head.
big job, but not that big, right?
Yeah, I don't. I can put you in touch with the people who you should have that conversation with.
All right, Dave Nash.
I'm hoping this is more simple than Herb's question.
I love the way Herb's brain works, though.
I know, it's
That's why we work together. That's why we've known each other for so long. The slide you showed about passing 6 of 9 planetary boundaries. Very important as a motivator in my view. Do you bring that subject up in your internal conversations at the company much? And if so, how do they react to this? Oh my gosh, is it, oh, we're going to be okay because we're doing great things? Is it, we're doomed? Is it something in between? How do you handle conversation on this topic?
I tend not to lead with doom and gloom because it's paralyzing for people. I thought you guys could handle it. Because you showed up here today voluntarily. But I do think we're being asked more and regulated more to talk about our context in terms of nature. So out of the EU, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive requires that you do your ecosystem's impact and you understand your impact on biodiversity. They're aligning with something that just got launched this week called the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD. And it's a framework for how you assess your impacts on nature and how that might be at risk to your business or your stakeholders. And there's different scenario analysis you're supposed to do around that and then report that out in your disclosures. And that's regulated now for any company that does significant business in the EU. That's a large company. So it's Eaton. And so I think it's something that we are going to have to pay more and more attention to and then start to manage to in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jenita.
You're welcome.
All right, I learned a lot. Thank you all for coming, but before you go, we have a bit of an announcement. One of the things that will take the world forward into a sustainable future is sustainable materials. And my partner Tricia is going to talk to you about a conference that's coming up here at OAI coming up in October.
Hi, this is just a quick announcement about Bioscene, which is a conference we have done pretty much on since 2016. It got interrupted a bit because of COVID. So we are back in full force on October 18th through the 20th here at OAI. As Carol said, the focus is on bio-inspired materials. And we've got over 20 fabulous speakers and 6 topics, which they will all discuss. And it's culminating with a discussion of how we get these things to market. So it's all great to have bio-inspired materials, but if we can't take it from the design board or the lab into the market, then what are we doing? So it's going to be a great event. It's kicking off with a tour from NASA, if the government doesn't shut down, and in a workshop. And so we encourage you all, if you're interested in this, to come. It's really an amazing event. It isn't just talking heads. There's a lot of interaction between the speakers and the audience. So many of the people in the audience have such deep backgrounds that they bring a lot to the question and the panel discussions as well. So when we send out these slides, we'll send out some information about Bioscene itself. If you got any questions, you can reach out to me.
It's going to be a great program, I promise you.
Didn't mention there's speakers from all over the world that are coming, so it's very cool. And if you want to look into it now, you visit oai.org and you can find some information about the conference. All right, I think we're done. Got 3 minutes left. We did everything on time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark and Tech. Thank you, everybody online, and have a great weekend.